everyone, and welcome to the session on the European Innovation Council this afternoon. My name is Kinga Stanisławska. I am the managing partner of Experior VC. It's a fund set up in Warsaw. I am also a member of the advisory board of the EIC and a member of the investment committee of EIC Fund. And today I have the pleasure of welcoming for a fireside chat Stéphane Wacky, who is head of financial instruments at DG Research and Innovation at the European Commission, and he chairs the EIC Fund Investment Committee. Good afternoon, Stéphane, and welcome.
Thank you, Kinga. Good afternoon.
It's a great time to be talking about the EIC Fund. We have just come to a major event last week, the 18th of March. It's a very, very important date for us for the launch of the EIC, the new EIC under the new framework. Could you talk a little bit about that, what the vision was and what we're aiming to do?
Well, I mean, the European Innovation Council is aiming at being the one-stop shop for innovators in Europe, from the origin of the idea, of the disruptive idea, let's say, to create new market or disrupt existing market. So to support it at the level of the lab, at the level of the design of the potential innovation or technology, to all the way to the acceleration of that idea when it becomes a company and it's entering the commercialization phase and trying to grow, scale up, and actually make a difference not only in the EU member states themselves, but also not only at European level, but potentially at global level. So we are trying here to nurture the best ideas, the best technologies coming from our innovators, from the conception to the moment the companies are entering the market, and for that we have rationalized and streamlined the funding instruments in support, plus a number of added features, developing and providing support in terms of soft skills, coaching, mentoring, and so on, in order to give to European innovators the ability to go to the EIC and find everything they need in order to develop it. And of course, the great novelty of the Horizon Europe framework program that will enter into force in the coming weeks is that we have under the European Innovation Council 10 billion euros to do exactly that. So to do this support through funding instruments and to a number of other activities under the soft skill categories in order to help our innovators to benefit from that and try to equalize a bit the gap that exists between Europe and our main competitors in North America and Asia. And we are doing that in many ways. And the way, of course, that you know very well, Kinga, is through one of the major new feature of it that we have now, an equity fund, a VC fund that is investing on the market like any other VC. And that is providing the beginning of the scale-up, the support for the beginning of the scale-up of our companies that have been selected and to which we hope will make a great deal of difference concretely for the prospects of these companies.
Yeah, so actually it's a very important time because I guess what Europe has is a lot of research, a lot of development, a lot of innovation. But there's definitely a funding gap out there. And we would like to change this situation. We would like to support that research and innovation going into commercialization, going into scale up much, much faster. And there is a lot of elements that obviously come around, as you said, into this big picture. But I think that ultimately what the venture capital sector would like to hear, and I guess what the founders would like to hear, is, you know, a little bit about what is it like to work with EIC Fund? What are the amounts of support that they can be eligible for? And then I guess what is the process? How would they get that money? And I guess in saying that, you know, it would be probably good for us to discuss a little bit how and at what stage the startups can come and pitch to us and how they can do that.
Yeah, so basically what the EIC offers at the level of funding instruments, like I said, we have an EIC EIC Pathfinder supports ideas at the level of the lab. This is usually done in the form of collaborative projects. And we have an EIC accelerator that will mainly function by offering blended finance, a combination of grants up to 2.5 million euros and equity up to 15 million euros. So it's not minor in terms of funding that we provide in the form of equity. The idea here is that the R&D cost that usually this type of ventures still experience, for example, testing out a prototype or things of that sort that usually the private sector doesn't like to usually finance, given the uncertainty about this type of technologies as innovation, we can offer grants to pay for that, for those costs, while the equity is more an investment of us as the EIC fund into the prospects on the commercialization phase of that innovation. Of course, what we would like to do is to crowd in the private sector coming in with us, and we believe that that aspect is facilitated by our offer on the table. Because, I mean, of course, if a company gets up to 2.5 million grant to absorb the R&D cost of testing, and at the same time, we have a promise of up to 15 million euros of equity coming in, we believe we're changing completely the discussion over this company, and that we make it much more attractive then for co-investors to come in and jointly support the company in its early stages. We have the capacity, of course, to then follow on the next rounds if necessary with those companies. If in particular we are, I would say, welcome to continue our role in supporting the growth of these companies. So we are in to really be a game changer for the innovative companies in Europe today at these early stages, where usually they struggle to find the necessary support, maybe not entirely, but at least in terms of total amounts that they need in order to finance their growth. Often they struggle to finance it, and we are trying to be, for them, a strength that will allow them to close, I would say, a financing round, which often they struggle to do so quickly and with the sufficient funding that they need. We are also, and this is again something that Kinga, you can maybe elaborate a bit on, we are trying to be, of course, very founder friendly, as we say, because of course this suboptimal investment situation in Europe today, if we compare, for example, the size of the VC market in Europe, which is about 4 to 5 times smaller than in the US, is quantitative, but it's also qualitative in the sense that often commercial VCs in Europe tend to look for a relatively quick return. Therefore, they look at investing in companies that are aiming at I would say, at a larger markets on which the replicability is very, very high. And therefore, the type of societal or social innovations or social or technologies that have, I would say, a greater impact on the well-being of Europeans and may not necessarily generate a faster return or such a massive return immediately, are not necessarily finding the necessary support from this type of commercial VC in Europe. And this is where we are also present in order to change the discussion around this type of VCs.
Yeah, actually, a couple of important things there that you said. 17.5 million euros for a startup is really a lot of money. And I think, you know, in the context that we're at Wolf Summit, and that usually covers a lot of startups from around Central and Eastern Europe, I think for the region, it's even more than it is in other parts of Europe. So it's a very, very important contribution. The fact that 2.5 million is available under a grant scheme, and at the same time, in a funding round, up to 15 million euros are available in equity. I think this is a super important and game-changing message. There have never been really funds that invest these huge amounts in startups in this region. And when rounds of this size happen, it's really big news. So I think that, you know, that's a very, very important message that startups need to look at, need to consider the application to EIC fund very, very actively, because filling that kind of a gap in Central and Eastern Europe is really, really tough. So I think that that's a very important message. The second message that I heard from you, and I know we've discussed this many times, is the crowding in aspect. The ambition of EIC fund is to really find private investors who will invest 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 times more than EIC fund is committing in a given round. And that is key because being founder friendly and being able to commit first and anchor around is a very important message for the founder, which he can use then to his advantage to build around him a team of venture capital, strategic or angel investors to augment the size of the funding round. And this is indeed something that we have done now already with a couple of the first signings of companies. And I guess with around 80 projects that now have been processed over the last, well, really it's 6 months, close to 6 months time, which are ripe for investments. So first of all, I would like to congratulate you, Stefan, because you had the investment committee, and I guess no other fund in Europe has ever done it this fast. So I think it's an important message that EIC fund can approve things fast, can move fast, and can really provide the quality and the stamp of approval to anchor in rounds. And I guess that is the other important message that that we should be talking about, which is for the founder, which is to support the founder. And then I guess in terms of the plans for the future, that of course means that first of all, we would like to invite as many deep tech startups as possible to pitch to EIC fund, but we are also looking for those co-investors, which is something that you mentioned. It's super important to crowd in the market. Could you talk a little bit about how we can do that, and you know, how we can grow more the relationships with other venture capitals, with strategic investors? What are our plans here?
Yeah, thank you for this, Kinga. Indeed, we did not wait until the year 2021 and the launch of Horizon Europe to start already implementing the EIC. We benefited from the member states allowing us to run a pilot of the so-called EIC pilot that we are implementing, on which indeed I have the privilege to chair the investment committee of the EIC fund. And in that regard, Kinga, we see each other every week and we talk very, very often. I think this experience of the pilot has been very interesting, in the sense that we have tried indeed to react very, very quickly as possible in order to provide the necessary capital in those conditions, of course, of the pandemic, which created particular challenges for us to function in a remote way, not only at the level of the evaluation, but also at the level of how the due diligence could be completed, and then the discussions we had with the founders, everything be done remotely, in order for us to mobilize these investments. I think at the end of the day, we are in the process indeed of completing a huge pipeline of 150 so companies in about a year and a half, which is a massive amount of companies to be dealt with, but also of more than 650 million euros of funding that will be provided. That is only the equity, because if you add, of course, the up to 2.5 million grant that they are also getting access to, and that is paid usually on an average of 6 to 8 weeks after the evaluation is completed. You have, I would say, even more funding that has been provided to those companies. But out of this experiment, of course, what we have observed is that many of the companies that have applied successfully and on which we are deploying the due diligence and therefore the investment, are already coming with investors already in the company, or investors that are ready to come in once the EIC fund comes in. And of course, here we are taking the position of a follower. We are not trying to lead the round. We are quite happy with letting the other leading investors lead the round in that case, because again, here we are there to provide additional catalytic effect by our funding, and not to try to replace the market when the market is already basically looking at the company and doing the job. But of course, many of our companies are quite early stage, and many of them are struggling to find, when we are looking at implementing our investment, are struggling to find co-investors immediately. And we are trying indeed to create a community of VCs, onboarding them in a matchmaking platform in order to provide, I would say, an early look at those opportunities that are now in our portfolio. And we believe that cooperation, that type of connection with the VC market is decisive, because at the end of the day, let's face it, whatever we can provide can only be a stage in the development of the company in which we provide public funds, but at the end of the day, the company will succeed because of its capacity to attract the private sector funding in it. And we play a role in facilitating that, accelerating that, but we cannot replace that. And of course, that is an important point to realize. So we are very active with the VC community, either through the companies in which we're entering, and other investors are already present, and this cooperation is ongoing, and it's very important. But also by looking out to other investors, some of them contacting us in events like the Wolf Summit, in events of that sort, when we not only meet potential founders, so therefore from our point of view, potential applicants to the EIC, but also investors that may find an interest in looking at our portfolio, reviewing the investment opportunities we're looking at right now, and maybe joining us in the subsequent rounds. We have many companies that are indeed quite interesting now, since we have put the capital to de-risk to a large extent those investments, and that become very quite attractive for commercial VCs now to look at. And of course, that process is something that we will now deepen it and industrialize it, if I may say, under Horizon Europe in the coming months. But that's, in our view, indeed one of the key of the future success of the whole EIC initiative.
So to all the VCs out there listening today, this is an invitation for you to come to join the EIC fund, to start collaboration. And then the next step would be, we are very open with the processes that are taking place and are looking to crowd in the market. So it's definitely the right time to get in touch with the EIC fund and start to build a relationship there, start looking at those companies that are ripe for investment. And more will be coming, of course, because the first batch, which is this nearly 160, that from the accelerator pilot, the new ones will be coming in this year. So it's a big step ahead. The countries that are covered by the program are quite big area. It's not just the EU, it's also some associated countries. So there are projects from Switzerland, there are projects from Israel. I think that is also an important thing to say, is that we are looking much, much wider. And so the opportunities to find super interesting deep tech projects are definitely there. And I would, and I'm sure Stefan too, would encourage the VC community listening today to get in touch, to build a relationship, and let's start collaborating on this, because the aim is to crowd in the market, to crowd in the lead investors, the follow-on investors, and the co-investors into all these investment projects. So it would be really, really good if we start this collaboration as soon as possible. And then I guess coming back to the founder community, of course, Central and Eastern Europe is one of the least developed areas of Europe in terms of VC investment. And then surely in terms of the large rounds, it is even more difficult to find those companies with those larger rounds. My thinking is that really EIC fund brings a new wave of possible investment size, of possible growth for the deep techs that are out here, but also more of an opening towards the rest of Europe. Because a part of what EIC offers is business acceleration services, is new relationships, new modes of cooperation with funds, with strategics, and also mentoring and coaching. So I think that maybe it would be good just to talk a little bit about the other more qualitative features that EIC offers to its to the companies it's working with. Stefan, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, indeed. So we are trying to provide a full support framework for innovators and companies that are selected for support get access to a range of services that they can utilize free of charge, such as access to coaches, access to mentors, access to events that we organize vis-a-vis, for example, potential markets where they exist in their sector. Sometimes we also take our companies further afield in other parts of the world in order to develop those markets, but also with European corporates that are active and are looking for opportunities to invest in new technologies, in new innovations. We can provide indeed markets for provide, I would say, not only markets for selling the products, but maybe potentially also finding the prospects for joining forces at the level of investment with these large corporates. And of course, basically all these activities are offered as part of the package of support that the EIC is providing. The idea here is, of course, to be as close to the action as possible. So it's not that if you apply to the EIC and your position in Poland, you will get a coach coming from Spain. I mean, we have also the people that know the Polish market very, very well, and that are able to understand the particular challenges of the different local ecosystems, and to bring to bear the necessary support that is needed there. What we also, of course, increasingly also offer is I would say, an access to, like I said, a wide range of entry points for other type of investors that may be not geographically present today in your area, but that are interested in these particular sectors in which you develop your innovation, and that are willing to get a bit outside of their comfort zone and looking at opportunities further afield. And I think that this is also a major feature of the EIC. We are trying to be an equalizer of opportunities across Europe. This is being done not only based on your geographical origin, and Kinga, as you correctly pointed out, there is a kind of an innovation divide in Europe, or in terms of opportunities, at least. Certain member states are definitely better positioned than others, and we are clearly trying to offer a direct access for any company directly to the schemes, where you have access to the entire framework there, independently of the support framework that you find at national level, the general ecosystem that is present. And in a way, we are equalizing then the opportunities that are offered to innovators across Europe, since you will be able to benefit to the full menu of options that we provide. As you know very well, Kinga, we are also trying to do that and address the gender investment divide that, as you know, it's been something that we paid a lot of attention to, and it's very close to our heart, because we have observed on the basis of hard figures that there is an underrepresentation of female-led companies or female-led VCs in Europe today. And it's not just a question of reaching a 50-50, but it's a question of equalizing the opportunities again, because what we observe in particular in the context of the crisis, and I would like very much to hear your opinion about it, is that we have seen that there has been, I would say, a kind of a differential in opportunities and a differential in impact of the crisis when we look at female-led companies and in particular the ability to get the necessary investment to grow those companies.
That's right. I'm very impressed with the emphasis that is being put on helping female founders under the initiative. And of course, last year with I believe it was the May cutoff in 2020, we have seen a large increase in female-led companies coming forth to EIC fund. I guess the level of finding female founders and going through the evaluation process, allowing them to present their project, is reaching 30% at this point, which is huge for Europe, and certainly for Central and Eastern Europe. And I guess I heard the commissioner state the goal of 40% of female representation to be passed through, hopefully, the evaluation process, with keeping the excellence, of course, in those projects, but having more and more female-led or mixed teams come forth and work with the EIC fund. I think that's a key emphasis on that. But of course, you're right, Stefan, that the last 12 months have been super difficult for any females leading projects, and whether those are startups, whether those are accelerators, those are VC funds, it's just more and more difficult. We have seen the number of publications of researchers, of female researchers, go down during the pandemic, mainly because they are busy taking care of families, they're busy taking care of their kids, of elders, and trying to contribute to society in different ways, which has somehow become a little bit a priority under the stressful and challenging scenario. And the same goes for the female founders. We've just released today a report about the female founders and funders landscape in Central Europe. And whilst up until now, a little bit over 2% of venture capital money was going towards female founders over the last 4 years, it has gone down in the pandemic in Central Europe to around 1%. And of course, any kind of focus programs, any kind of help that we can create for the female founders to change this dynamic is super important. So I know that the programs under the EIC fund are not just the ones to do with investment, although that is super important. There are also those coaching sessions, there are mentoring sessions. There is now a special program, especially being developed for female founders. That is very new, because I think that was just launched literally a few weeks ago. It's a very, very new initiative that will hopefully bring together the best mentors, the best coaches, and help those female founders accelerate faster. And hopefully we can get to the 40% KPI that we would love to see in those applications to EIC fund and those companies that we can start working with. I have to say that I've met a few really extraordinary female founders as a part of EIC fund that we are supporting right now. So ladies from France, from Czech Republic, from Belgium, absolutely amazing companies that they are building, full of positive impact, full of just, you know, a positive approach to society, to usually it's actually either ecology or green technology or medtech that they are focusing on, which also shows that many times the female founders do try to develop projects that have a lot of the positive impact out there. So some really, really amazing founders. And I hope very much that that this is a process that we are just at the beginning of, and much, much more work to be done to help those female founders out there. So indeed, that's a big thing for Central and Eastern Europe. It's also a very important area of focus. I'm seeing that we are getting some questions from the audience already. A question about Cayman Islands. Well, to be honest, no. The EIC fund invests in European Union countries and associated countries under the program. And a list of those is available on the website. But so far, Cayman Islands is a little bit not in our range. So that would not be a country of investment or a country of focus. There is a question about exits, which of course it's always an important one for founders, for VC investors. Well, on that one, if I may, let me just say that EIC fund was registered last year. The first investments have started just a few months ago. So what is important, I believe, in exits is the fact that EIC fund can provide something a little bit more unique in Europe, and that is patient capital. Usually venture capital funds have a ready-made investment horizon and a lifetime of 10 years. EIC fund does not need to rush. It can truly provide a patient capital investment, whether that happens in equity or that happens initially in convertibles and then is converted into equity. It is truly a patient investor with no set time frame for an exit, which I believe founders find especially important for those deep tech projects that require a much longer time for the R&D element and the scalability. Stefan, what is your view on the patient capital model for the types of companies that EIC fund is backing?
Yeah, I mean, what you said is quite important indeed, because we are trying again to address a situation on the market that is far from being satisfactory in terms of opportunities that companies, founders found to finance their growth, and of course we are here to try to be part of the solution as much as possible. And one way we can add value is of course not to be pressed by a fixed time frame in order to generate a return. I mean, of course, we would like, when we exit the company, to generate an upside. I mean, obviously, that money will then be used to finance other innovations in Europe, other innovators, other startups. So this is, of course, important that we can generate an upside when we leave the company. But at the same time, we are in no hurry to do so, and we will remain a partner in the company as long as it is needed. We have also the capacity to accompany the subsequent rounds and to do follow-on rounds when and therefore accompany the scale-up process of the startups in which we invest, which is of course very important. Therefore, our view is that we can stay in those companies on average over a period of 7 to 10 years, but we could extend it to 15 years if needed. And if the technology is important for us to remain in that company for a longer time, we can envisage it, of course. So from that point of view, we are really trying to address some of the major issues of the way the VC market functions today in Europe, and to add value to that market in that way.
That's right. VC market, in the way it functions, is with these limited time frames, and it's super important to be able to support the founder for much, much longer, especially in these breakthrough innovation cases that we are seeing. Just on the recent pandemic, the companies that have been developing those vaccinations have been around for many, many years, often close to 20 years, before they were able to truly bring to market something that can help, that can be very quickly then tailor-made towards the pandemic. And we have seen that with those vaccinations being put on the market during just literally a very short time period. So, but some of these innovations to be developed need that starting point, need that long R&D process. And those are the kind of innovations that EIC Fund is surely targeting as the #1 types of companies to back. I guess what is also important from a standpoint of both founders and VCs is the approach to minority ownership. Because often VC funds ask, well, if EIC fund is a co-investor, are there any target ownership levels that it wants to have, or will it just behave like any other financial investor in case of ownership levels and in case of also monitoring the companies, in case of board seats, in case of observer seats. I think that's an important thing to say, and I'm sure, Stefan, you have some thoughts on the minority stakes that EIC Fund is targeting and the approach then to working with those companies.
Yeah, we try to not to dilute the founders too much. So our approach is to limit our participation around 10%. It's not entirely possible in every one of the deals. That depends very much on the structure of ownership of the company once we are looking at acquiring a stake. So sometimes we can go indeed a bit higher than 10%. But we are definitely very concerned when we say too much dilution of the founders, which will potentially impact very much the prospects of the company going forward. And we can indeed try to rectify this in the conditions that we will apply for our investment. So this is one other element of the founder friendliness, but it's also in our view more than just that. It's also a realization that we need to create the right alignment of interest and the right incentives for the management team and the founders to actually stay in the company and develop the innovation, and therefore to make a success of that what becomes a joint initiative, a joint venture from us, the other investors, and the startup itself.
Yeah, that is super important, that EIC fund has a very founder-friendly approach to dilution, making sure that it's not just this round, that the cap table holds well for the next round after that, and also for the one after. Because I guess what has been discussed a lot is that the number one person, or the number one goal, is to support the founder and the founding team. And the only way to do that is to allow them to be able to fundraise well the next coming rounds after this one, and then to either support those rounds financially, like Stefan said, as a follow-on investment, or alternatively, and this is a better scenario, find market players that will be supporting those next round of investments, but making sure at the same time that the dilution levels are appropriate for the type and the stage of development of those companies. Super important to keep supporting them, and I guess that's what we are saying, right, Stefan?
Yes, indeed. Yes, I totally agree with you. But as we know, Kinga, in many of the cases we see, this is quite challenging, and we are trying, of course, to redress that as much as it is possible when we see a situation that is not very conducive to our satisfactory entry in the company, and then for the perspective of scaling up of that company, given what has happened when we arrive in the company. So we are definitely looking at that with great deal of attention.
In terms of working with the company going forward, of course, as any investor, we will have the appropriate reporting set up, and that's the same reporting that companies report to the venture capital market or to their strategic partners. So obviously, reporting is a part of an important relationship with going forward. But at the same time, in addition to what is the formal side of this relationship, I think what is important is the less formal one, which is the working with the coaches, the working with those mentors, and building relationships with corporates for the companies that EIC Fund has invested in. So it's a two-way street. The founders obviously need to be very proactive in their approach to signaling who they need, what kind of support they need, but the tools are surely there. And I guess it's just a question of reaching out for those tools and coming to pick them, because the resources of EIC Fund are really, really huge in terms of the number of people that are in its network and the number of corporates where the relationships are. So it's really for those founders to come and say what it is that that EIC Fund can help with, and that's a little bit how I look at it. It's a huge additional potential resource for the founders to be able to scale faster and grow faster.
Yes, indeed, and then additionally, there is a range of activities that are done via what we call the community of beneficiaries that are EIC beneficiaries, and we're just trying to ensure that through that a number of opportunities arise. I mean, this is how, for example, last year we managed to mobilize our beneficiaries on the COVID-19 challenge, with a number of innovation being brought to the market by those companies that had something, as you explained, though they were present maybe on other segments or were not, of course, directly involved in fighting the pandemic. They managed to very quickly retool and propose innovations in the context of what was happening at the time. So this is something that we have been using, and that we'll continue to use as we grow bigger. Another point, of course, to realize that we're present in all sectors. I mean, it's a bottom-up call with no pre-designed themes. Even if we have a number of challenges, that we put the focus on green, that we put the focus on digital, and put the focus on health, because these are the three main areas that are the priorities of the Commission. But any innovation that sits at the junction of different sectors can come and apply for support. So there are no exclusivity there for certain sectors to be privileged vis-a-vis others, and that creates, I would say, a kind of a very varied portfolio of companies that we have, and therefore, again, looking at potential investors or potential VCs, you can find in our portfolio probably companies that are within your scope of intervention very easily, and can correspond to what you're looking for in order to find opportunities to invest. So this is something that, of course, we would like to emphasize.
That's right. So the scope is big. There is no particular focus in terms of sector. Anything that is deep tech, that has a positive impact on society, can come to pitch. And I guess then the question is, Stefan, when is a good time to come and approach EIC Fund as a founder? What would be the next sort of date that should be kept in mind if you're a founder thinking about approaching EIC Fund?
So from the 8th of April, you can already go on the website by Googling EIC Fund next call, and you will find the site on which you can already prepare a very short proposal with a pitch that you will film. We'll review that, and then we will revert to you, telling you, okay, you can go ahead and prepare a longer proposal, and we'll have a number of tools to help you do so. And then to prepare the longer proposal, the next deadline is to the 9th of June, with an evaluation coming at the beginning of July for the possibility of the fund to looking at investing, I would say, already in September, October of this year. So you could get very quickly access to this money.
Okay, I think that's a very, very important message for the founders, that the process is tiered and you can pitch quite easily. It's accessible in the first instance. It does not take a long time to prepare. You will get the feedback very, very soon and know if you're eligible for the full-blown application. And that is super founder friendly. So indeed, please be on the lookout from the 8th of April on the EIC Fund to apply for the process and to initiate your film presentation to be able to pitch to EIC Fund. Everyone is invited, to all the deep tech startups out there, to all those female founders. Please look for EIC Fund after the 8th of April. I think this brings us to the end of our session. Any questions later from founders, from VCs, please feel free to find us on LinkedIn or on Twitter, and just ask whatever it is that you have specific on the EIC Fund and how to work with the fund. And then please look again, 8th of April on the website. All the processes will be there, and we hope to see everyone very, very soon. Thank you so much, Stefan, for your time. Stay healthy.
You too.
And hopefully we connect very, very soon. Thank you for listening. Have a great afternoon.